You clicked on this video for a reason. Perhaps you've grown tired of motivational fluff that dissolves the moment real adversity strikes. Perhaps you've noticed that the gentle philosophies and positive thinking mantras leave you defenseless when life decides to test your resolve. Or perhaps something deeper has stirred within you, a recognition that true strength is forged not in comfort, but in the crucible of uncompromising truth. If that resonates, then know this: we are not here to offer you consolation prizes or spiritual candy. We are here to excavate the ancient fortress of the mind, to uncover principles so brutal in their honesty that they will either break you or remake you entirely. There is no middle ground in what we're about to explore. When I speak of Stoicism, I do not speak of passive resignation or emotionless existence. That is the caricature painted by those who fear its power. No, the Stoicism I reveal today is a philosophy of psychological warfare, a system of mental fortification that has produced emperors who ruled with wisdom, slaves who died with dignity, and warriors who faced death as calmly as they faced breakfast. These principles are not comfortable. They demand that you strip away every excuse, every victim narrative, every comforting delusion that keeps you weak. They ask you to stand naked before reality and say, "I am responsible for what happens next." That terrifies most people. It should terrify you too, but only if you're still attached to the version of yourself that needs others to blame for your suffering. The first brutal principle that will reconstruct your mind is this: you are not entitled to happiness, comfort, or fairness. The universe owes you nothing. Your feelings about this fact are irrelevant. This is not pessimism. This is the foundation of all true power. Most people walk through life carrying an invisible contract with existence, believing that if they follow certain rules, life will reward them accordingly. They expect their kindness to be returned, their hard work to be recognized, their good intentions to shield them from misfortune. When reality fails to honor this imaginary agreement, they collapse into bitterness, resentment, and paralysis. But the Stoic mind recognizes this contract as a fiction. There is no cosmic justice department ensuring fair outcomes. There is no universal law guaranteeing that your suffering will be proportional to your mistakes. The sooner you accept this, the sooner you stop wasting energy demanding that reality conform to your preferences and start adapting yourself to what actually is. This principle cuts deeper than you might initially realize. It means that your childhood trauma, while real, does not grant you a lifetime exemption from responsibility. It means that your financial struggles, while challenging, do not entitle you to success without effort. It means that your heartbreak, while painful, does not give you the right to close your heart to future possibilities. The brutal truth is that life is not a meritocracy where good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. Life is a complex system where storms destroy both the righteous and the wicked, where diseases strike the healthy and the unhealthy alike, where accidents occur regardless of how carefully you've planned your day. When you truly absorb this principle, something remarkable happens. You stop being surprised by adversity. You stop feeling personally attacked by circumstances. You stop waiting for the world to apologize for not meeting your expectations. Instead, you begin to see challenges as simply data points in the ongoing experiment of existence. This leads us to the second brutal principle. Your emotions are not facts, and they are certainly not commands. They are weather patterns in the landscape of your consciousness, and like all weather, they will pass if you do not feed them with your attention and agreement. Modern culture has convinced us that our feelings are sacred, that we must honor every emotional impulse as if it were divine revelation. We've been taught that suppressing emotions is unhealthy, that we must express every feeling to be authentic. This is psychological sabotage disguised as wisdom. The Stoic understands that emotions are evolutionary tools designed for survival in environments vastly different from our current reality. Fear kept our ancestors alive when saber-toothed tigers roamed the earth. But that same fear response now triggers when you receive a difficult email from your boss. Anger helped our predecessors defend their territory from invaders, but now it erupts when someone cuts you off in traffic. Your emotional responses are not sophisticated analyses of your current situation. They are often outdated programs running on ancient software, interpreting modern challenges through primitive algorithms. To treat every emotional reaction as meaningful guidance is to let a frightened child drive a sophisticated machine. This does not mean you become emotionally numb. It means you become emotionally intelligent. You learn to observe your feelings without immediately obeying them. You create space between stimulus and response, that sacred pause where choice lives. You recognize that feeling angry doesn't require you to act angrily. That feeling afraid doesn't require you to retreat. That feeling hurt doesn't require you to hurt others in return. The practice begins with simple observation. When an emotion arises, instead of immediately justifying it or acting on it, you pause and examine it like a scientist studying a specimen. What triggered this response? What story am I telling myself about this situation? What would happen if I chose not to believe this feeling represents truth? This leads us to perhaps the most transformative realization. You are not your thoughts, and you are certainly not your first thoughts. You are the awareness that observes thoughts, the consciousness that can choose which mental visitors to entertain and which to escort to the door. Most people live as prisoners of their own mental chatter, mistaking every random thought for important information. They believe that because a thought appeared in their mind, it must be significant, true, or worthy of attention. This is like believing that every person who knocks on your door deserves to be invited in for dinner. The untrained mind produces thousands of thoughts per day, most of them repetitive, many of them negative, and nearly all of them unnecessary for your actual survival or flourishing. These thoughts arise from conditioning, from habit, from the brain's pattern-seeking mechanisms trying to make sense of an often senseless world. But here's what changes everything. You can learn to watch your thoughts the way you might watch clouds passing through the sky. Some are dark and threatening, others are light and pleasant, but none of them are permanent, and none of them are you. You are the sky, vast and unchanging, through which all weather patterns move. This perspective doesn't develop overnight. It requires consistent practice, the daily discipline of stepping back from the mental noise and remembering your true nature as the observer. It requires catching yourself when you begin to identify with temporary mental states, when you start believing that you are your anxiety, your depression, your excitement, or your confusion. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus, who lived as a slave before becoming one of history's most influential teachers, understood this principle intimately. He knew that while others could control his body, chain his movements, even threaten his life, they could never control the fundamental space of his consciousness without his permission. That space, that awareness, remained sovereign regardless of external circumstances. This brings us to the fourth brutal principle. You cannot control outcomes, but you can control your preparation, your effort, and your response to whatever results. This is not a consolation prize. This is the only real power you possess. Most people exhaust themselves trying to control things that are fundamentally outside their influence. They worry about other people's opinions, market fluctuations, natural disasters, political outcomes, and countless other variables that remain stubbornly independent of their preferences. This is like trying to control the ocean by shouting at the waves. The Stoic mind makes a clear distinction between what is within your control and what is not. Your actions are within your control. Your words are within your control. Your effort is within your control. Your preparation is within your control. Your character is within your control. Your response to events is within your control. Everything else is outside your domain of influence. Other people's choices, the weather, the economy, the past, the future, your reputation, your health, your lifespan, these exist in the realm of things you can influence but never fully control. This distinction is not academic. It's the difference between a life of constant frustration and a life of focused effectiveness. When you stop wasting energy trying to control the uncontrollable, you have more resources available for mastering what actually is within your power. The practical application of this principle transforms how you approach every aspect of life. Instead of worrying about whether your business will succeed, you focus on doing everything within your power to give it the best chance of success. Instead of anxiously hoping people will like you, you concentrate on being someone worthy of respect. Instead of fearing failure, you prepare so thoroughly that you can face any outcome with dignity. This preparation becomes a form of spiritual practice. You train not just for the outcomes you desire, but for the outcomes you fear. You develop contingency plans, not from pessimism, but from wisdom. You strengthen your character, not because you expect to be tested, but because testing is inevitable. The ancient Stoics had a practice called negative visualization, where they would regularly imagine losing the things they valued most. This wasn't morbid thinking. It was psychological inoculation. By mentally rehearsing potential losses, they reduced their attachment to things beyond their control and increased their appreciation for what they currently possessed. When you truly internalize this principle, you become anti-fragile. Setbacks don't destroy you. They strengthen you. Criticism doesn't devastate you. It informs you. Failure doesn't define you. It educates you. You begin to see every challenge as an opportunity to practice these principles, to prove to yourself that your inner fortress can withstand any siege. But here's where most people stumble. They try to apply these principles only when life is already falling apart. They wait until they're in crisis to begin building mental resilience. This is like waiting until you're in a fight to start learning martial arts. The time to forge your mind is now, in the quiet moments, in the ordinary challenges, in the small daily opportunities to choose strength over weakness. The fifth brutal principle will shatter another comfortable illusion. Your past does not define you, but your relationship with your past determines everything about your future. Most people live as archaeologists of their own pain, constantly excavating old wounds and displaying them like trophies of victimhood. You have been conditioned to believe that understanding your trauma is the same as transcending it, that analyzing your childhood patterns grants you permission to remain trapped by them. This is therapeutic mythology designed to keep you comfortable with limitation. The Stoic mind recognizes that while your past shaped you, it does not own you. Every moment presents a choice. Will you be the author of your next chapter? Or will you remain a prisoner editing the same old story? The person who hurt you 10 years ago has no power over your decisions today unless you grant it to them. The mistake you made last month has no authority over your actions right now unless you bow to its phantom influence. This is not about denial or suppression. This is about refusing to let yesterday's weather determine today's journey. You can acknowledge what happened without being enslaved by it. You can honor your experiences without being defined by them. You can learn from your past without living in it. The practice begins with a simple question. Who am I choosing to be right now, independent of who I was 5 minutes ago? This question cuts through the momentum of identity, the psychological gravity that keeps you orbiting. The same patterns, the same reactions, the same limitations you've grown comfortable calling yourself. Every breath is a new beginning if you have the courage to treat it as such. Every decision is an opportunity to demonstrate that you are more than the sum of your conditioning. Every challenge is a chance to prove that your character is not a fixed entity, but a dynamic force that can be sculpted through conscious choice. But here is where the principle becomes truly brutal. This freedom terrifies most people more than any prison. If you are not your past, if you are not your trauma, if you are not your circumstances, then you have no excuses left. You become fully responsible for who you choose to become, and that responsibility is the heaviest weight most souls will ever be asked to carry. This leads us to the sixth principle, perhaps the most devastating to the modern ego. You are not special, and that is precisely what makes you powerful. Your problems are not unique. Your struggles are not unprecedented. Your pain is not more meaningful than anyone else's pain. The contemporary mind has been poisoned by the myth of individual specialness, the belief that your particular combination of experiences, feelings, and challenges grants you a unique status in the cosmic order. This belief is not empowering. It is paralyzing. It makes you the center of a universe that does not revolve around you, setting you up for constant disappointment when reality fails to acknowledge your imagined significance. The Stoic recognizes that human suffering follows patterns, that the challenges you face have been faced by millions before you and will be faced by millions after you. This is not diminishing. This is liberating. It means you are not alone in your struggles. It means solutions exist because others have walked this path. It means your problems are solvable because they are not unprecedented. When you release the need to be special, you gain access to the accumulated wisdom of every human who has ever faced similar challenges. You stop reinventing the wheel of resilience and start applying time-tested principles. You stop feeling isolated in your pain and start recognizing it as part of the shared human experience. This principle also destroys the victim mentality that keeps so many people trapped in cycles of helplessness. If your suffering is not special, then neither are your circumstances. If others have overcome similar or worse situations, then your current challenges are not insurmountable obstacles, but temporary conditions requiring appropriate responses. The practice of this principle involves regularly reminding yourself that you are one of billions of humans navigating the complexity of existence. Your concerns, while valid to you, are not the center of anyone else's universe. Your bad day is not a cosmic event requiring universal acknowledgement. Your success is not proof of your superiority, and your failure is not evidence of cosmic injustice. This perspective shift changes everything about how you approach challenges. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you ask, "How can I respond to this effectively?" Instead of feeling personally targeted by difficulty, you recognize it as part of the natural landscape of human experience. Instead of waiting for special treatment, you develop the skills necessary to handle whatever comes. The seventh principle cuts even deeper into the architecture of weakness. Your comfort zone is not a sanctuary. It is a prison disguised as safety. Every day you choose comfort over challenge, you choose stagnation over growth. Every time you avoid difficulty, you train yourself to be weak. Modern life has created an environment where discomfort is treated as a problem to be solved, rather than a signal to be heeded. We have heating when we're cold, air conditioning when we're hot, entertainment when we're bored, food when we're hungry, and distractions when we're anxious. This constant buffering against discomfort has created a generation of people who panic at the first sign of difficulty. The Stoic mind understands that discomfort is not the enemy of a good life. It is the catalyst for a strong life. Every muscle grows under resistance. Every skill develops through challenge. Every character trait strengthens through testing. Comfort is not the goal. Capability is the goal. This means you must actively seek out controlled discomfort. Take cold showers not because you enjoy them, but because they teach you that you can endure what you initially resist. Exercise not just for health, but to practice pushing through the voice that says, "I can't do this." Fast not just for physical benefits, but to learn that your desires are not commands that must be immediately obeyed. The practice extends beyond physical challenges. Say no to social invitations that feel obligatory but drain your energy. Have difficult conversations you've been avoiding. Take on projects that stretch your abilities beyond their current limits. Choose the harder path when the easier path leads nowhere meaningful. Each time you voluntarily embrace discomfort, you build what the Stoics called the discipline of desire. You train yourself to want what you have and to pursue what is worthy rather than what is easy. You develop the capacity to delay gratification, to endure temporary pain for long-term benefit, to choose principle over convenience. But here's the crucial distinction. This is not about becoming a masochist who seeks suffering for its own sake. This is about developing the strength to choose suffering when it serves a purpose, to embrace difficulty when it leads to growth, to endure hardship when it builds character. The eighth principle strikes at the heart of modern anxiety. You cannot think your way out of problems that require action. Analysis without implementation is just sophisticated procrastination. Planning without execution is just elaborate daydreaming. The contemporary mind has been trained to believe that understanding a problem is equivalent to solving it. People spend years in therapy analyzing their patterns without changing them. They read countless books about success without applying the principles. They discuss their goals endlessly without taking the first step toward achieving them. The Stoic philosophy is fundamentally practical. It judges ideas not by their elegance or complexity, but by their results when applied to real-world challenges. A simple principle that changes behavior is infinitely more valuable than a profound insight that remains purely intellectual. This means you must develop a bias toward action, even imperfect action. The plan you execute is superior to the perfect plan you never begin. The mediocre attempt teaches you more than the brilliant strategy that remains theoretical. The failed experiment provides more data than the successful theory that goes untested. The practice involves setting small, specific, measurable actions that move you toward your goals. Instead of thinking about getting in shape, you do 10 push-ups right now. Instead of planning to write a book, you write 1 paragraph today. Instead of considering a career change, you update your resume this week. This principle also applies to emotional challenges. You cannot think your way out of depression. You must act your way out by engaging in activities that gradually rebuild your sense of agency and accomplishment. You cannot analyze your way past anxiety. You must face the situations that trigger it and prove to yourself that you can survive what you fear. The ninth principle demands that you confront perhaps the most insidious lie of modern existence, that you deserve a life free from pain, struggle, and disappointment. This belief has created a generation of people who view suffering as abnormal, who interpret every setback as evidence that something has gone terribly wrong with their personal narrative. But suffering is not a bug in the system of existence. It is a feature. Pain is not a deviation from the natural order. It is woven into the very fabric of consciousness. The Stoic mind does not seek to eliminate suffering, but to transform its relationship with it, to alchemize inevitable pain into wisdom, strength, and character. This transformation begins with a radical reframe. Suffering is not happening to you. It is happening for you. Every difficulty is a teacher arriving in disguise. Every setback is a masterclass in resilience. Every loss is an opportunity to discover what cannot be taken from you. This is not positive thinking. This is strategic thinking. When you stop resisting pain and start examining what it has to teach you, everything changes. The breakup that devastated you becomes a lesson in self-reliance. The business failure that crushed your ego becomes education in humility and preparation. The illness that terrified you becomes a reminder of what truly matters and what is merely noise. But here lies the paradox that most minds cannot grasp. The more you try to avoid suffering, the more you multiply it. The person who runs from every uncomfortable emotion creates an internal pressure that eventually explodes in anxiety, depression, or rage. The individual who refuses to face small pains accumulates them into massive wounds that require years to heal. The Stoic practice involves leaning into discomfort rather than away from it. When grief arises, you do not immediately reach for distractions. You sit with the grief and let it teach you about the depth of your capacity to love. When fear emerges, you do not automatically retreat. You investigate what the fear is protecting and whether that protection still serves you. This does not mean you become a passive victim of circumstances. It means you become an active student of whatever reality presents. You extract every lesson, every insight, every opportunity for growth that difficulty offers before you work to change or eliminate it. The 10th principle shatters another comfortable illusion. Your reputation is not your identity, and your image is not your worth. The energy you spend managing how others perceive you is energy stolen from becoming who you actually are. The prison of other people's opinions is built from your own desperate need for approval. Most people live as performers in a play they never auditioned for, constantly adjusting their behavior to earn applause from an audience that is not even paying attention. They shape their words to avoid offense, modify their goals to appear modest, and suppress their authentic nature to fit into spaces that were never meant to contain them. The Stoic understands that other people's opinions of you are none of your business. These opinions exist in their minds, not in reality. They are formed from incomplete information, filtered through personal biases, and subject to change without notice. To base your self-worth on such unstable ground is to build your identity on quicksand. This principle does not advocate for reckless disregard of social norms or deliberate antagonism toward others. It advocates for the radical act of living from your own center, rather than from the imagined expectations of people who may not even be thinking about you. It means making decisions based on your values, rather than on how those decisions will be perceived. The practice begins with catching yourself in moments when you are performing, rather than being authentic. Notice when you modify your opinion to match the room. Observe when you downplay your achievements to appear humble or exaggerate your struggles to gain sympathy. Recognize when you are living someone else's definition of success, rather than your own. Each time you choose authenticity over approval, you strengthen your connection to your true self. Each time you speak your truth, despite potential criticism, you build the muscle of integrity. Each time you pursue your path, despite others' confusion or disapproval, you prove to yourself that your opinion of you matters more than anyone else's opinion of you. The 11th principle cuts to the bone of human delusion. You are going to die, and everyone you love is going to die. And this is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be integrated. Death is not the enemy of a meaningful life. Denial of death is the enemy of a meaningful life. Modern culture has created elaborate systems to help us forget our mortality. We hide aging behind cosmetics, park our elderly in institutions where we don't have to see them decline, and speak of death only in whispers and euphemisms. This denial does not protect us from death. It protects us from life. When you truly accept your mortality, when you let the reality of your finite existence penetrate your consciousness, everything becomes more vivid, more precious, more urgent. The petty grievances that consume your energy reveal themselves as trivial. The relationships you've been neglecting suddenly demand attention. The dreams you've been postponing refuse to wait any longer. The Stoic practice of memento mori, remembering death, is not morbid contemplation, but life-affirming clarity. It strips away the non-essential and illuminates what actually matters. It transforms time from an infinite resource you can waste into a finite gift you must invest wisely. This awareness changes how you spend your days. You stop postponing important conversations because you realize that postponement might become permanent. You stop taking your health for granted because you understand it is temporary. You stop assuming that the people you love will always be available because you know that availability has an expiration date. But here is where most people misunderstand this principle. Accepting mortality does not lead to despair. It leads to liberation. When you stop pretending you have forever, you start living as if today matters. When you acknowledge that nothing lasts, you begin to appreciate what is present. When you face the certainty of loss, you discover the power of gratitude. The 12th principle demands the ultimate sacrifice of the ego. You must be willing to be wrong about everything you currently believe to be true. Your current worldview, no matter how carefully constructed, is based on incomplete information and limited perspective. Your most cherished beliefs may be the very barriers preventing you from accessing deeper truth. The untrained mind clings to its opinions as if they were precious possessions, defending them against all contrary evidence. It treats challenges to its beliefs as personal attacks, interprets new information through the filter of existing assumptions, and dismisses anything that threatens its current understanding of reality. The Stoic mind maintains what Zen masters call beginner's mind, a state of openness and curiosity that allows new information to reshape understanding. It holds beliefs lightly, as working hypotheses rather than absolute truths. It recognizes that being wrong is not failure, but opportunity, not weakness, but wisdom. This principle requires tremendous courage because it means surrendering the false security of certainty. It means admitting that you might be mistaken about things you've built your identity around. It means being willing to change course, even after investing significant time and energy in your current direction. The practice involves regularly examining your beliefs and asking, what if I'm wrong about this? What evidence would I need to see to change my mind? What am I not seeing because I don't want to see it? These questions are uncomfortable because they threaten the ego's need to be right, but they are essential for growth. When you become comfortable with uncertainty, when you stop needing to have all the answers, you become available for learning that was previously impossible. You stop defending outdated positions and start exploring new territories. You stop being a prisoner of your past understanding and become a pioneer of expanding awareness. The 13th principle strikes at the heart of modern weakness. You must develop the capacity to act without the guarantee of success, to begin without knowing how things will end, to commit without certainty of outcome. The demand for guarantees before action is the paralysis that keeps most people trapped in lives they never chose. Every significant decision involves risk. Every meaningful pursuit requires you to venture into unknown territory with incomplete information. Every act of creation demands that you begin before you feel ready, that you leap before you can see the landing. The Stoic mind does not eliminate risk. It develops the capacity to act wisely in the presence of uncertainty. It prepares thoroughly while accepting that preparation cannot control outcomes. It plans carefully while remaining flexible when plans encounter reality. It commits fully while holding results lightly. This principle transforms your relationship with failure from something to be avoided at all costs to something to be learned from and integrated. When you no longer need guarantees, you can take calculated risks that expand your possibilities. When you stop demanding certainty, you can begin projects that might not work, but could transform everything if they do. The practice involves taking small actions despite uncertainty, building your tolerance for ambiguity, and proving to yourself that you can handle outcomes you cannot predict. Start the business without knowing if it will succeed. Write the book without knowing if anyone will read it. Have the conversation without knowing how the other person will respond. Each act of courage in the face of uncertainty builds what the Stoics called the discipline of action. You develop the capacity to move forward based on principle rather than comfort, on values rather than guarantees, on vision rather than certainty. You become someone who shapes reality rather than waiting for reality to provide permission. These principles, when truly integrated, create what the ancient Stoics called the sage, a person so aligned with reality that they cannot be shaken by external circumstances. But this is not a destination you arrive at. It is a direction you travel. Every day presents new opportunities to practice these disciplines, to strengthen these mental muscles, to prove to yourself that your inner fortress can withstand any siege. The path is not comfortable, but comfort was never the goal. The path is not easy, but easy was never the point. The path is not popular, but popularity was never the measure of truth. The path is brutal in its demands and uncompromising in its standards, but it is also the only path that leads to genuine freedom. The 14th principle dismantles another cherished illusion. Your need to be understood is not a basic human right, but a luxury that weakens your resolve. The desperate hunger for others to comprehend your motivations, validate your choices, and acknowledge your struggles is a form of psychological dependency that keeps you tethered to external approval. Most people exhaust themselves explaining their decisions to those who lack the context to understand them. They justify their paths to individuals who have never walked similar terrain. They seek validation from minds that operate from entirely different value systems. This is like expecting a fish to appreciate the beauty of mountains, or asking a desert dweller to understand the ocean's rhythms. The Stoic recognizes that understanding is not distributed equally, nor is it required for action. The entrepreneur does not need the employee's comprehension to build their vision. The artist does not require the critic's approval to create their masterpiece. The philosopher does not demand the masses' agreement to pursue truth. Your path becomes clearer when you stop expecting others to see the destination you're walking toward. This principle cuts deeper than mere social dynamics. It addresses the fundamental question of where you derive your sense of worth. Do you exist to be understood, or do you exist to understand? Do you live to be seen, or do you live to see clearly? The person who requires constant explanation and validation has made themselves dependent on forces beyond their control. The practice begins with catching yourself in moments when you over-explain your choices to people whose opinions should carry no weight in your decision-making process. Notice when you seek permission from those who have no authority over your life. Observe when you modify your authentic expression to make others more comfortable with your existence. When you release the need to be understood, you gain access to a form of freedom that few people ever experience. You can pursue paths that make sense to you even when they appear incomprehensible to others. You can make decisions based on your inner compass rather than on whether you can adequately justify them to external observers. The 15th principle reveals a truth that will disturb those who cling to victimhood. Your past traumas, while real and significant, become weapons against your own growth when you wield them as excuses for present limitations. The person who remains frozen by what happened to them has chosen to let their worst moments define their entire existence. This is not about minimizing genuine suffering or pretending that traumatic experiences don't leave lasting impacts. This is about recognizing that you face a choice every day. Will you be a person who survived something terrible and let it limit you forever? Or will you be someone who survived something terrible and used it as fuel for becoming extraordinary? The victim mindset, while providing temporary comfort and social sympathy, ultimately becomes a prison that keeps you trapped in the energy of your worst experiences. Every time you explain your current limitations by referencing past wounds, you reinforce the neural pathways that keep you connected to pain rather than to possibility. The Stoic understands that trauma is something that happened to you, not something you are. Your identity exists independent of your experiences, no matter how formative or devastating those experiences may have been. You are not your rape, your abandonment, your betrayal, your abuse, your neglect, or your loss. You are the consciousness that experienced these things and has the power to determine what they mean going forward. This transformation requires a fundamental shift in how you relate to your own story. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" you begin asking, "How can I use this experience to become stronger, wiser, more compassionate?" Instead of focusing on what was taken from you, you examine what capabilities you developed in response to adversity. The practice involves rewriting your narrative from victim to victor, from someone who was damaged by circumstances to someone who was forged by them. This does not mean denying pain or pretending that harmful experiences were somehow good. It means refusing to let past events have ongoing power over your present choices. Every day you choose to be defined by your trauma is a day you give your perpetrators continued victory over your life. Every moment you spend explaining your limitations through the lens of old wounds is a moment stolen from building new possibilities. The ultimate revenge against those who harmed you is not hatred or bitterness. It is becoming so magnificent that their actions become irrelevant to your story. The 16th principle strikes at the foundation of modern anxiety. Your need to control outcomes is not strength, but weakness disguised as responsibility. The person who cannot act without guaranteeing results has confused control with preparation, management with mastery. True power lies not in controlling what happens, but in controlling how you respond to whatever happens. The weather does not ask your permission before changing. Markets do not consult your financial goals before fluctuating. People do not coordinate their choices with your preferences before making decisions that affect you. To rage against this reality is to wage war against the fundamental nature of existence. The obsession with controlling outcomes creates a perpetual state of tension and disappointment. You become like someone trying to direct a river with their bare hands, exhausting yourself, fighting forces far greater than your individual will. Meanwhile, the wise person learns to navigate the current, to work with the flow rather than against it. This principle does not advocate for passivity or fatalism. It advocates for focusing your energy where it can actually make a difference. You cannot control whether your business succeeds, but you can control the quality of your preparation, the consistency of your effort, and the integrity of your methods. You cannot control whether others love you, but you can control whether you become someone worthy of love. The practice involves identifying the specific aspects of any situation that fall within your sphere of influence and releasing attachment to everything else. When facing a job interview, you focus on your preparation, your presentation, and your authenticity, rather than on the interviewer's decision-making process. When pursuing a relationship, you concentrate on being your best self, rather than on manipulating the other person's feelings. This shift from outcome-focused to process-focused thinking eliminates much of the anxiety that plagues the modern mind. You no longer carry the impossible burden of trying to control variables beyond your influence. Instead, you pour your energy into the elements you can actually affect, creating a sense of agency and effectiveness that builds with each application. The 17th principle demands that you confront perhaps the most uncomfortable truth of human existence. Most of your suffering is optional and self-created through your resistance to what is already happening. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is a choice you make through your interpretation of and reaction to pain. The untrained mind treats every uncomfortable sensation, challenging circumstance, or unwanted outcome as a problem requiring immediate solution or elimination. It fights against reality, demanding that things be different than they are, creating layers of mental anguish on top of whatever actual difficulty exists. But consider this. When you fully accept what is happening right now, when you stop arguing with reality, the suffering often dissolves even if the challenging circumstances remain. The person who accepts their financial difficulties experiences less distress than the person who spends their energy raging about economic unfairness. The individual who acknowledges their physical limitations suffers less than someone who constantly fights against bodily constraints. This acceptance is not resignation or passive surrender. It is the recognition that you cannot address any situation effectively while you are simultaneously denying its existence or demanding that it be different. Acceptance creates the mental space necessary for effective response. Resistance creates the emotional turbulence that prevents clear thinking and wise action. The Stoic practice involves catching yourself in moments of resistance and asking, what would happen if I stopped fighting this reality and started working with it? What energy am I wasting on wishing things were different that could be redirected toward making them better? This principle applies to everything from minor inconveniences to major life transitions. The traffic jam becomes an opportunity for patience rather than a source of rage. The illness becomes a teacher of priorities rather than evidence of cosmic injustice. The relationship ending becomes a doorway to new possibilities rather than proof of personal failure. When you stop creating additional suffering through resistance, you discover that your capacity to handle life's genuine challenges is far greater than you imagined. The energy you were wasting on fighting reality becomes available for navigating reality skillfully. The 18th principle reveals a truth that threatens the foundation of modern identity politics. Your group memberships, demographic categories, and tribal affiliations do not determine your character, capabilities, or destiny. The person who defines themselves primarily through collective identities has outsourced their individuality to forces beyond their personal control. This is not about denying the reality of different experiences based on background, circumstances, or demographics. This is about refusing to let those categories become limitations on what you can achieve or excuses for what you failed to attempt. The moment you say, I can't do this because I am X, you have surrendered your agency to a category rather than exercising your individual will. The Stoic mind recognizes that while you may share characteristics with others, your character is uniquely your own construction. Your choices, your values, your responses to adversity, your commitment to growth, these elements of your being transcend any group identity. You are not primarily a representative of your demographic. You are primarily a unique consciousness navigating existence. This principle becomes particularly challenging in an era that emphasizes group identity over individual responsibility. It requires swimming against cultural currents that encourage you to see yourself as primarily defined by categories you did not choose rather than by choices you make daily. The practice involves regularly examining how much of your self-concept is based on tribal memberships versus personal characteristics you have actively developed. Do you derive more identity from what groups you belong to or from what principles you uphold? Do you spend more energy defending your categories or developing your capabilities? When you release the need to be primarily understood through group affiliations, you gain access to the full spectrum of human potential. You are no longer limited by what people like you are supposed to be capable of achieving. You are no longer trapped by what others with your background have or have not accomplished. You become free to write your own story independent of collective narratives. The 19th principle cuts to the heart of modern weakness. Your comfort with mediocrity is not humility, but a betrayal of your potential. The person who settles for a good enough in areas that matter has chosen convenience over character, ease over excellence. This is not about perfectionism or the neurotic pursuit of flawless performance in every domain of life. This is about identifying the areas where excellence serves not just your own development, but your capacity to contribute meaningfully to the world, and then refusing to accept mediocre effort in those domains. Most people have been conditioned to believe that ambition is somehow unseemly, that the desire for excellence suggests arrogance or selfishness. They have been taught to downplay their capabilities, to aim for the middle ground, to avoid standing out in ways that might make others uncomfortable. But this false modesty serves no one. When you operate below your capacity, you deprive the world of what you could contribute at your highest level. When you accept mediocre results in important areas, you train yourself to accept mediocre results everywhere. When you choose comfort over growth, you choose stagnation over service. The Stoic recognizes that excellence is not about comparison with others, but about the full expression of your own potential. It is about becoming who you are capable of becoming, rather than remaining who you currently are. It is about honoring the gifts you have been given by developing them to their fullest extent. This principle requires brutal honesty about where you are currently operating below your capacity. Are you giving your best effort in your most important relationships? Are you developing your talents to their fullest extent? Are you contributing at the level you are capable of contributing? Are you accepting mediocrity in areas where you could achieve excellence if you were willing to pay the price? The practice involves identifying one or two domains where excellence matters most for your development and contribution, then refusing to accept anything less than your best effort in those areas. This might mean working longer hours on projects that matter, investing more deeply in relationships that have potential, or pursuing skills that could transform your capacity to serve. Excellence is not a destination, but a commitment to the ongoing process of becoming. It is the daily choice to do what is required rather than what is comfortable, to pursue what is possible rather than what is easy, to become who you could be rather than remaining who you currently are. The 20th principle demands that you face the ultimate test of character. You must be willing to stand alone for what you believe is right, even when standing alone costs you everything you think you want. The person who compromises their deepest values to maintain comfort, relationships, or opportunities has sold their soul for temporary benefits that will ultimately prove meaningless. This is not about stubborn adherence to rigid positions or the inability to learn and grow. This is about having principles so deeply integrated into your being that you would rather lose everything external than lose your integrity. It is about developing the kind of character that cannot be bought, threatened, or seduced into betraying itself. Most people discover that their values are more flexible than they imagined when those values are tested by genuine consequences. They find reasons to justify compromises that would have appalled them in the abstract. They discover that their principles have price tags they never realized existed. But the Stoic understands that integrity is not negotiable, that character is not for sale, that some things are worth losing everything to preserve. The person who maintains their principles under pressure proves to themselves and the world that they are governed by something higher than circumstances, more permanent than convenience, more valuable than comfort. This principle will be tested repeatedly throughout your life. You will face moments when doing the right thing costs you money, relationships, opportunities, or reputation. You will encounter situations where compromise seems reasonable, where everyone else is making exceptions, where standing firm appears foolish or self-destructive. These moments are not obstacles to your development. They are the very purpose of your development. They are opportunities to discover what you are truly made of, to prove that your character can withstand pressure, to demonstrate that your values are more than convenient philosophies you hold, when holding them is easy. The practice involves regularly examining your values and asking yourself, what am I willing to lose to preserve this principle? At what point would I compromise this belief? What price would be too high to pay for maintaining my integrity? These questions reveal the true depth of your commitment to your stated values. When you develop the capacity to stand alone for what you believe is right, you gain a form of power that cannot be taken from you. You become unshakable because your foundation is internal rather than external. You become fearless because there is nothing anyone can threaten that is more valuable than your integrity. But here lies the paradox that few understand. The person willing to lose everything to maintain their character rarely loses everything. Integrity attracts integrity. Strength recognizes strength. Character calls to character across the noise of a world that has forgotten what these qualities look like when lived rather than merely discussed. The 21st principle strikes at the heart of modern victimhood. Your circumstances do not determine your character. Your character determines how you respond to your circumstances. The person who blames their environment for their choices has confused causation with correlation, context with control. Every day you witness people in similar situations making radically different choices. Some individuals born into poverty become wealthy through discipline and persistence. Others, born into wealth, squander every advantage through poor decisions. Some people facing illness become inspiring examples of courage and grace. Others with perfect health waste their vitality on trivial pursuits. The difference is never the circumstances. The difference is always the character brought to bear on those circumstances. Your situation provides the stage, but you write the script, direct the action, and deliver the performance. You are not a victim of your environment. You are an actor within it. This principle does not deny that some people face more challenging circumstances than others. It does not pretend that all starting points are equal, or that external factors have no influence on outcomes. It simply recognizes that within any set of circumstances, you retain the power to choose your response, and that response shapes your character more than your circumstances ever could. The practice involves catching yourself when you begin to explain your choices through your circumstances, rather than through your character. Notice when you say, "I had to act this way because of my situation," rather than, "I chose to act this way." Observe when you use your environment as justification for behavior that contradicts your stated values. Every time you choose character over circumstances, you strengthen your sense of agency and personal power. Every time you respond to challenges in alignment with your principles, rather than in reaction to your conditions, you prove to yourself that you are not a prisoner of external forces. This principle transforms victims into victors, not by changing their circumstances, but by changing their relationship to their circumstances. It reveals that freedom exists not in the absence of constraints, but in the conscious choice of response within whatever constraints exist. The 22nd principle demands that you confront the ultimate source of human suffering. Your attachment to how things should be prevents you from effectively dealing with how things actually are. The gap between your expectations and reality becomes a source of constant frustration when you cannot accept that reality is under no obligation to meet your preferences. This attachment operates at every level of human experience. You expect people to behave according to your moral standards and suffer when they disappoint you. You expect your efforts to be rewarded proportionally and become bitter when merit goes unrecognized. You expect life to be fair and feel victimized when it proves indifferent to your sense of justice. But your expectations are not universal laws. They are personal preferences projected onto an impersonal universe. Your sense of how things should be is based on limited information, personal biases, and often unrealistic assumptions about how complex systems operate. Reality does not consult your preferences before unfolding. The Stoic mind learns to hold expectations lightly, to prefer certain outcomes without being attached to them, to work toward goals without being devastated by setbacks. This is not indifference. This is wisdom. It is the recognition that you can care deeply about outcomes while accepting that outcomes are not entirely within your control. This principle becomes particularly challenging when dealing with other people's behavior. You expect others to keep their word, to treat you fairly, to reciprocate your kindness, to operate according to the same values you hold. When they fail to meet these expectations, you suffer not just from their actions, but from the gap between your expectations and their reality. The practice involves regularly examining your expectations and asking, is this expectation based on how things actually work or on how I wish they worked? Am I suffering more from what happened or from my belief that it should not have happened? What would change if I released this attachment while maintaining my commitment to positive outcomes? When you release attachment to specific outcomes, you gain access to a form of peace that cannot be disturbed by external circumstances. You can still work diligently toward your goals while remaining equanimous about results. You can still maintain high standards while accepting that not everyone will meet them. This detachment from outcomes paradoxically makes you more effective at achieving them. When you are not emotionally dependent on specific results, you can think more clearly, adapt more quickly, and persist more consistently through setbacks and obstacles. The 23rd principle will shatter your final refuge from responsibility. There is no perfect moment to begin, no ideal circumstances to wait for, no amount of preparation that will eliminate all risk from meaningful action. The person who waits for perfect conditions has chosen permanent postponement disguised as prudent planning. You have been conditioned to believe that timing matters more than commitment, that circumstances must align before you can act, that you need permission from the universe before pursuing what calls to you. This is the paralysis of perfectionism masquerading as wisdom. It is the sophisticated form of cowardice that convinces you that inaction is intelligence. The Stoic understands that perfect conditions are a myth, that readiness is not a feeling, but a decision, that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is now. Every day you wait for better circumstances is a day stolen from the life you could be building with current circumstances. This principle applies to every domain where you have been procrastinating under the guise of preparation. You do not need the perfect business plan to start your first venture. You need a viable idea and the willingness to learn through iteration. You do not need complete emotional healing to begin a healthy relationship. You need basic self-awareness and the commitment to grow alongside another person. You do not need total financial security to pursue meaningful work. You need enough resources to take the next step and the courage to build as you go. The practice involves identifying one important area where you have been waiting for conditions to improve and taking immediate action with current resources. Start the project with the tools you have rather than the tools you wish you had. Begin the conversation with the words "you know" rather than the perfect phrases you might discover later. Launch the initiative with your current knowledge rather than the expertise you plan to develop someday. Each act of beginning without perfect preparation builds what the Stoics called the discipline of initiative. You develop the capacity to move forward with incomplete information, to learn through experimentation rather than just through study, to trust your ability to adapt and improve rather than demanding guarantees of success. The 24th principle cuts through the modern delusion of endless options. Having too many choices is not freedom, but a sophisticated form of bondage that keeps you trapped in perpetual deliberation rather than decisive action. The person overwhelmed by possibilities has confused opportunity with paralysis. Contemporary life presents an unprecedented array of options in every domain. You can choose from thousands of career paths, hundreds of relationship models, countless lifestyle philosophies, and infinite entertainment possibilities. This abundance, which should enhance life, often diminishes it by creating decision fatigue and commitment phobia. The Stoic mind recognizes that true freedom comes not from having unlimited options, but from making definitive choices and fully committing to their development. The person who keeps every door open never walks deeply through any doorway. The individual who maintains all possibilities never experiences the profound satisfaction of mastery in any particular domain. This principle requires the courage to say no to good opportunities so you can say yes completely to great ones. It demands that you close certain paths, not because they lack merit, but because pursuing them would prevent you from fully exploring the paths you choose to walk. The practice involves identifying the areas where you have been paralyzed by too many options and making definitive choices that eliminate alternatives. Choose the career path that resonates most deeply and stop researching other possibilities. Commit to the relationship that has the most potential and stop keeping backup options. Select the skill you want to master and stop dabbling in activities that prevent focused development. When you narrow your focus and deepen your commitment, you discover that limitations can be liberating, that constraints can spark creativity, that saying no to many things allows you to say yes with your entire being to the few things that matter most. The 25th principle demands that you face the ultimate test of maturity. You must learn to find meaning in the ordinary, to discover purpose in the mundane, to create significance through consistency, rather than constantly seeking peak experiences and dramatic transformations. Modern culture has addicted you to intensity, convinced you that life should be a series of mountaintop experiences, breakthrough moments, and profound revelations. This addiction to the extraordinary makes you restless during ordinary moments, dissatisfied with steady progress, and unable to appreciate the quiet satisfaction of consistent effort. But the Stoic knows that character is built in the valleys, not on the peaks. Strength develops through daily discipline, not through occasional heroics. Wisdom accumulates through patient observation, not through dramatic insights. The person who cannot find meaning in washing dishes will struggle to find meaning in more glamorous pursuits. This principle transforms how you relate to routine, repetition, and the unglamorous work that comprises most of any meaningful endeavor. The entrepreneur learns to find satisfaction in daily operations, not just in funding rounds and media coverage. The artist discovers joy in daily practice, not just in moments of inspiration and recognition. The parent finds purpose in consistent care, not just in milestone celebrations. The practice involves identifying activities you currently consider boring or beneath you and discovering the deeper significance they contain. Find the meditation within mundane tasks. Recognize the character development hidden in routine responsibilities. Appreciate the subtle satisfaction of completing ordinary work with extraordinary attention. When you no longer need life to be constantly exciting, you become available for the profound peace that exists within simplicity. When you stop demanding that every moment be meaningful, you begin to recognize the meaning that was always present in moments you previously dismissed. The 26th principle strikes at the foundation of modern anxiety. Your need to understand everything before you act is not wisdom, but a sophisticated form of procrastination that keeps you trapped in analysis while life passes you by. Some truths can only be discovered through experience, not through contemplation. The contemporary mind has been trained to believe that understanding precedes effective action, that you should comprehend all variables before making important decisions, that wisdom requires complete information before commitment. This is the paralysis of the overeducated, the hesitation of those who have confused knowledge with experience. But life is not an academic exercise where you can study all possibilities before taking the test. Life is an experiment where you learn by doing, where understanding emerges through engagement, where wisdom develops through the marriage of theory and practice. Some lessons can only be learned by living them. The Stoic recognizes that action and understanding develop together in a spiral rather than in a linear sequence. You take action based on current understanding, which generates new experience, which deepens understanding, which informs better action. This cycle continues throughout life for those wise enough to engage it. This principle applies particularly to major life decisions where complete information is impossible to obtain. You cannot fully understand marriage until you are married. You cannot completely comprehend parenthood until you are a parent. You cannot entirely grasp entrepreneurship until you start a business. The attempt to understand these experiences from the outside keeps you perpetually outside. The practice involves identifying areas where you have been stuck in analysis and taking experimental action to generate direct experience. Instead of reading more books about starting a business, start a small business and learn through operation. Instead of endlessly researching relationships, engage more deeply in the relationships available to you. Instead of studying creativity, create something and discover what emerges through the process. Each step into unknown territory builds what the Stoics called practical wisdom, the kind of knowledge that can only be gained through lived experience rather than theoretical study. This wisdom becomes the foundation for increasingly effective action and deeper understanding. The final principle encompasses all others and demands the ultimate transformation. You must become someone who lives by principles rather than by circumstances, someone whose character provides the stability that external conditions cannot supply, someone who has developed an inner fortress that cannot be shaken by the storms of existence. This is not the end of a process, but the beginning of a way of being. Every previous principle has been preparing you for this moment when you recognize that you are not a victim of life, but a creator within it, not a passive recipient of circumstances, but an active responder to whatever arises. The person who has integrated these principles does not become immune to difficulty, pain, or challenge. They become someone who meets difficulty with strength, faces pain with courage, and approaches challenges with confidence in their ability to respond effectively. They become unshakable, not because nothing shakes them, but because their foundation is internal rather than external. This transformation changes everything about how you move through the world. You stop seeking security in things that can be taken from you and find it in capacities that cannot be removed. You stop depending on others for validation and develop the inner authority that makes external approval unnecessary. You stop fearing change and start seeing it as the natural rhythm of existence to be served rather than resisted. The practice of this final principle involves daily recommitment to living from your center rather than from your circumstances, to choosing responses based on your values rather than your emotions, to building your life on the foundation of character rather than on the shifting sands of external conditions. When you have become this person, when these principles have moved from concepts to lived reality, you will have achieved something rarer than wealth, more valuable than fame, more lasting than any external achievement. You will have become mentally unstoppable, not because nothing can stop you, but because nothing can stop you from responding with integrity, courage, and wisdom to whatever life presents. This is the promise and the challenge of these brutal principles. They will break you free from every comfortable limitation and forge you into someone capable of meeting existence on equal terms. The choice, as always, remains yours. These 27 principles stand before you, not as gentle suggestions, but as demands from reality itself. You have been given the blueprint for mental invincibility, the architecture of an unshakable soul. But knowledge without application is merely intellectual entertainment, and wisdom without practice is just sophisticated procrastination. You now face the most brutal choice of all. Will you remain who you have always been, comfortable in your familiar limitations and predictable suffering? Or will you undertake the terrifying work of becoming who these principles can forge you into? There is no middle ground. There is no partial commitment to truth. There is no gentle path to genuine strength. The world will not applaud your transformation. Most people prefer others to remain weak because strength reminds them of their own chosen limitations. Your commitment to these principles will separate you from those who mistake comfort for contentment, who confuse being liked with being respected, who trade their potential for the temporary security of mediocrity. But in that separation, you will discover something precious beyond measure, the unassailable peace that comes from living in alignment with reality rather than in resistance to it. You will develop the kind of strength that cannot be threatened, the kind of wisdom that cannot be confused, the kind of character that cannot be corrupted. These principles are not merely philosophy. They are weapons in the war against your own weakness. They are tools for excavating the buried potential that lies beneath years of conditioning, compromise, and comfortable self-deception. They are the keys to a fortress that once built cannot be torn down by any external force. The choice is yours, and the time is now. Begin where you are, with what you have, in whatever circumstances currently surround you. Start today. Start this moment. Start with the next decision you make, the next word you speak, the next action you take. Become mentally unstoppable, not because the world cannot touch you, but because you have developed the strength to transform whatever touches you into fuel for your continued becoming. This is your invitation to freedom. This is your call to greatness. This is your moment to choose.